Hi everybody, we are in the book of Samuel. Rabbi, thank you for joining us. We're now seeing that the kingship is almost going to kick into action right now with what's happening here. The whole chapter starts with a king called Nachash. Now that is snake, that actually means snake, and he is from the Ammonites. If you can just tell us again, who are the Ammonites and why does it feel like this whole chapter starts with very gloomy?
Well, the Ammonites are our distant relatives. We had a cousin or nephew at one point whose name was Lod, and Lod had made this really terrible decision that he'd rather live in stone than live with Avram, with Abraham. So he ends up going through all kinds of interesting relationships, including an ancestral one with his daughters, and Ammon is one of the children who were produced by this. So this is somebody who probably has some type of stigma attached to the nation. There's some kind of a distance. I could have been part of the Avram family, but I'm not. So there's probably some kind of jealousy, hatred, or as at least intrigue going on. And it says that Nachash Ammoni comes, Vayichan, and he puts the city to siege, a city called Yavesh Gilad. They're frightened and they're willing to do anything they can to survive.
Make a pact with him.
Including to sign some kind of treaty and to serve him. Which means that here, we again hear in the background a lack of leadership. You know, something that we've already heard a bit, there's a lack of leadership, because if there really was a strong central authority, they would not feel that they're on their own. So this is more like of a border town, which is susceptible to attack, and now they're being attacked and they feel that they have no choice.
And what is interesting is he's not just trying to take leadership over them, he's humiliating them in what I read here.
Correct. Especially he says, we'll have to take out, forget about creating a covenant, kurot lanu brit, which is what they want. He says, echrot lakem, v'nikor lachem kol ayin yamin, I'll take out your right eye. And we wonder if ayin yamin has to do with binyamin. Because again, at least under the surface, because the yamin, the right, and knock out your right eye, which is obviously an issue of trying to humiliate them and turn them into invalids, as it were.
And that's where we see that this message then reached Shaul. He is in the field. It's very interesting where we find him at this point. It says here, Shaul was just coming from the field driving the cattle. So he heard that he's going to be the king.
He's a cowboy.
Exactly. He's in the field. He knows that he has a much greater task ahead of him. It doesn't feel like he's really getting ready for that. But then this news of his brothers reach him, and it acts almost like a catalyst that moves him forward, that he now wants to take action against this king.
Right. And that verse 6, is a dramatic verse. "Vatitzlach ruach Elokim al Shaul b'shemo et hadvarim ha'eleh, yichar po ma'od." And the Spirit of God came upon him.
It gripped him.
Yeah, it gripped him. It grabbed him in a profound way when he heard these things, and he became very angry. Now, anger itself is something which can be very dangerous, but anger which is married to the Spirit of God is something completely different.
That's dangerous for whoever it's going.
Especially somebody with all of Shaul's capabilities, his strength and his power and his leadership in potential at least. But this transformation is something which is really dramatic, but and I want to speak about it in a moment because it's a little scary. We know at other places in the Bible and Tanakh, we know that there are people called the students of prophets. And these were people, apparently, they were prophets in training, which means to become a prophet is something which for many, many years you work on yourself spiritually until the Spirit of God comes upon you.
It's like a school that you have to go through.
Right, and that's the general rule. I'm not going to say there aren't any exceptions, but over here we have somebody who's a regular person. Again, we have people born into certain positions, but here's a person who suddenly, in the middle of the field, in the middle of work, in the middle of being a cowboy, suddenly hears something and the Spirit washes over him and he becomes a prophet. Of course, we wonder something which you gain so quickly, is it also so easy to lose? Right? That's also part of the question. So here's a man who becomes totally transformed, and he suddenly becomes this leader that Shaul knew he was going to be, that he has no idea that he has this capability, and he now is going to take responsibility for the Jewish people, which means he now puts together an army and he does this by going to the various tribes. We are now going to put an army together, and you are going to join us. And he uses his force and he uses his will, and he gathers them together, and he goes and he protects these people who were being attacked, which means as much as when the people were asking for a king who was going to be somebody who was going to judge us, and perhaps even we heard judge us by the rules of other nations, here a whole other side of kingship has been presented, and that is the king as the leader, as the military leader, as
And
the person
protector.
the protector.
That's
The
it.
protector.
Yeah.
And that's the role that he moves into. Of course, a moment ago, we think of a lot of our leaders being shepherds. He had his cows. He was the one who was taking care of the cows. He was
So
looking
he
for
moves from that.
Right. He was looking for the lost cows. What was it? The lost cows.
Lost donkeys.
Lost donkeys.
To show that again, he looks for the lost donkeys.
He was the one who was looking for the lost donkeys, and now he's taking care of his cows. And he is this man who had been taking care, again, of the animals. And now suddenly he's come to this realization that there are people, there are brethren, there are other tribes that he needs to take care of. And it's not what happens to some people, well, maybe someone else can do it. Maybe someone else will step in. He just has, and that's really this spirit of understanding that he has. I need to do this. And that's the anger and the prophecy together. This is the will of God. This needs to be done. These people, my brothers, are being humiliated, and who knows what can happen to them. I need to take responsibility.
It's as if the need is the catalyst that brings him into his new role as a king. We then see that they send messengers, and they tell the people of the town that when the sun grows hot at a certain time, Shaul will come, and he will then wage war against Nachash. And then he wins. He takes over. And something interesting happens that just tells us again about his character. In the previous chapter, we saw that when he was hiding behind things, when he didn't want to, through the lottery, take his place, some of the people mocked him in the previous chapter. And here we see that some of the people say, now you can take care of these people.
The naysayers.
The naysayers.
That's right.
And now you have to take care of them. And usually kings here will go and make a statement to say, okay, to show you that I am king now. But he doesn't do anything. He's not a vengeful guy. At this point, he just says, let them, no man shall be put to death this day. So he moves in pity and in mercy here, even on those who came against him.
Right, he has compassion, and therefore he is angered when he feels his people are attacked, but he has compassion otherwise. But maybe even this compassion is foreshadowing the compassion he's going to have with Agag, which will be an appropriate compassion. That only when attacked, that's when he feels the anger. But when he's not being attacked, he doesn't feel it. And correct, I would think that a different type of person would want to really establish his leadership, and anybody who stands in his way, make a statement, make an example of somebody else, and he doesn't do this. But the other thing that we find over here is that Shmuel is far more enthusiastic than we had ever thought he would be, because he sees this other role of king. And the role of king not in terms of a replacement for his sons who were judges, but rather the person who's going to lead the battle out, go to the field, go to battle, protect our people. And it's at that point that the kingship can be established. It's at that point that Saul or Shaul can be properly anointed as king of Israel.
So that's the official inauguration. It takes only place after this episode, and it happens in Gilgal. What do we learn from that? Why specifically Gilgal?
Well, the short answer to that is I don't know. The longer answer to that is that maybe multiple places named Gilgal. If there is a theory of conservation of places, and it's all the same place, that's one of the first places they entered when they came into Israel. But as I said, I'm not sure if it's the same place. If it is, then that's where they first come into Israel, and that's where our ownership of the land begins, and that's where the kingship begins. But as I say, I'm not at all convinced it is exactly the same location, but there may have been multiple places called Gilgal.